Kathleen Wilson has been a City of Charleston councilwoman since 2005, but this past November, she lost to Carroll Jacks. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, Kathleen speaks exclusively to me one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Well, Kathleen, it is so good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I appreciate this.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. You know, a lot of people are sitting here right now thinking this. Kathleen Wilson, you were a councilwoman from 2005, and unfortunately you lost an election just recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that email you sent, sit down and shut up, to the Save James Island group. And I was thinking this, can you tell people this maybe? What can you, okay, if you were to send an email to everyone in the City of Charleston, how could you say this? Sit down and shut up and let me tell you what actually happened during the election?
Oh yeah, but nobody wants to hear that part. It's more fun to throw gasoline on the fire. No, what we've had on James Island for quite a while, I understand it's one island and it's one community, but we have 3 different governments. And the good form is to stay out of the business of the other governments. I don't interfere in James Island's issues. If my opinion is asked, I give it. Otherwise, I don't show up at their meetings. I don't make demands of their zoning or their planning or anything to do with the PSD or the town. But we've had a contingent of people who regularly insert themselves into the city. They are not working on behalf of the city. They insert themselves into city matters, and it has gotten really out of hand. And for a lot of times, actually, our interests were very, very similar. And what my position was mirrored their position.
Right.
But there comes a point when I have to act for the good of the City of Charleston, not somebody who doesn't live in the City of Charleston. And when I do that, I became a villain. And it was pretty much overnight, and there were a couple of unfortunate things. You know, Planning Commission voting down the moratorium. Yeah, I wasn't on that probably the way I should have been, but you know what? I got a super majority to override that Planning Commission. So it was fixed, no harm done. But this is what happens when you have people who won't run for office, but want to act as government officials.
Let me ask you this interesting question. What should the Kathleen Wilson legacy be in your mind when you think of all your accomplishments on City Council?
I held the line with James Island as best I could. I really forged a much, much better relationship between the town and the city, and I'm very, very proud of that. I did the best I could for my district. Things happen, development is inevitable. James Islanders get very upset with development, I understand that, but it's not as though West Ashley hasn't had any new neighborhoods, or Somerville, or Berkeley County, those sorts of areas. And also I towed the line with the fiscal responsibilities of the city. I didn't vote for tax increases, property tax increases. I learned a considerable amount. It's been a glorious 12 years. I've loved every second of it.
What would you miss most about Charleston City Council?
My colleagues and the city staff. We have some terrific employees in the city. We really do. And I'm slowly seeing them depart as well, which makes me very sad. But my colleagues, I serve with the best bunch of men.
You do?
I really do.
They're all great.
Yeah,
I know every last one of them.
They're great, and I've had such a good time. My knowledge has increased 1,000%. It's made me a much more complete person. And yes, it's baptism by fire. There's no question. I've learned how to deliver a hit and take a hit. I've learned how to take a stand. It hones leadership skills. Like, they were in me, but they had never had a chance to come out or mature or find my voice and find my path. And it gave me the ability to do all of that. So I'm forever grateful. And love him or hate him or somewhere in between, I had 10 years with Joe Riley, who, whether you want to admit it or not, is one of the great mayors in United States history. And I had the ability to watch how he worked for 10 years.
Wow. You talk about delivering hits and taking hits and whatnot. How come that didn't come out during the election?
Oh, I think it did.
Okay.
It did. I mean, there were absolutely brutal things. You know, you wake up to Facebook and you see a meme of yourself with something really vile written under it. That happened several times. You know, just being lit up all the time.
Okay.
And, you know, conversely, as far as giving it, all I tried to do was point out an opponent who'd only lived here 2 years, according to voter registration and auto taxes, and had no relationships and no knowledge of the community, and was being supported by people who didn't live in the city of Charleston. And the mayor, I think, made a very, very poor decision in actively going out and campaigning for 4 candidates and working against several of his incumbents. It's very poor form for a mayor to do that.
Is that political suicide on this part?
We'll see in 2 years.
Speaking of the mayor and city council, let me take you to last night's city council meeting. And this article from Post and Courier reads like this. Charleston residents won't see higher property taxes next year, but their monthly water bills will be $2 higher to fund more drainage improvements. So what are those improvements?
Well, that's to be decided, and I know drainage is a concern all over the city.
Yeah.
And we voted not to raise property taxes. That was something that I think was a universal opinion among council members, is we did not want to do that. We felt that we had room to cut in other areas to preserve the property tax where it is, give our employees a cost of living raise, do a couple of other financial things. And because stormwater and drainage are such crucial issues, we did not think that the public would fight a $2 increase in a stormwater fee. That pile of money, and it's about $2 million a year, will go towards, first of all, getting a strategic plan, not study after study. That conversation was had as well. We don't need a series of studies. We need somebody to help us prioritize and figure out, in addition to the priorities, what things are going to cost and the best way of going ahead and getting that done, as well as how can we leverage other monies, perhaps federal grants, how can we get monies from other pools, no pun intended. But at any rate, how can we cobble together in the most expeditious manner the funding to tackle some of these projects, and then in what order will these projects come?
And the article goes on to say this. City Council approved the 2018 budget on Monday with a total operating fund of $211.9 million, up $12.3 million from last year. So what is the biggest difference between last year and this year?
As far as why the increase in revenue?
Right.
Well, we've had good years economically. So, business licenses go up, building permits, those sorts of things. So we're seeing increases in those areas. But it's more the liabilities that we had that were somewhat unprecedented. The biggest one being the state pension system. We know the pension plan is in trouble. And our state government unfortunately took a lot of that liability and dumped it on municipalities. So we did not incur this debt. However, we are being asked to pay a big chunk of it back.
Wow.
Millions a year in addition to shore up that pension fund.
And what is the relationship with the state government and the city of Charleston in your mind?
Well, obviously we're beholden to the state. The state supersedes any law that city council may choose to pass. So, if they say jump, we have to say how high. And I wish there was some way of getting around that liability or having the liability spread out a little more evenly. But that's a big one.
And this was actually interesting to me, that is, because Mike Seekin says this about the fee increase, because he said it was the best approach. He says this, quote, "It was absolutely the right way to go because it captured more properties." So what are those properties in your mind?
Well, keep in mind, nonprofits don't pay property taxes. So there's a lot of property right here on the peninsula that doesn't pay property taxes. College of Charleston, the Medical University, Roper, St. Francis, the Citadel, parks. Park space, so all of those, that's a lot of acreage if you look around. By choosing to raise the stormwater fee rather than raise property taxes, now we are able to catch revenue from those entities because they all use water.
Wow. So you have, what, 2 more meetings left, I believe? 3 more?
1 or 2, certainly through the end of December. I'm not sure how January works.
5 things. What 5 things you want to tackle before you leave office?
Oh, geez. Let me think. We want to get this budget passed. I still remain greatly concerned as to how we spend our accommodations tax, our hospitality tax. I would like to see those things worked out. I'd like to see the City of Charleston step up and start helping itself regarding capital projects. What we have to do is we have to learn to work at the same time. It's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach. We've got to learn to do 2 or 3 things at the same time. I know drainage is absolutely huge. It has to be attended to.
Okay.
However, as the quote, I think it was Mike Seekings, no, who was it last night? I can't remember who, said the seawall and drainage can't suck all the air out of the room for years and years and years. We've got to be able to continue to move forward. I want to see West Ashley tackled.
Wow.
West Ashley, we talk and talk and talk
Right.
about West Ashley. Nothing's going on in West Ashley. I don't consider a grocery store to be economic development. And that's where the mayor and I disagree. Well, we're working on it. Well, we don't see anything in a grocery store. That's all well and good, but that's not substantial economic development.
You talk about economic development. Let me go back downtown here and talk about the carriages. Obviously, I know the ordinance passed last night, which I believe carriages, well, the horses can come back if the temperature is above 95 degrees. Talk to me more about that ordinance.
It was a little tidying up, and it was a pretty easy pass for council because everybody seemed to be in agreement with it.
Right.
The carriage industry, you know, quite honestly, I am not in a position to look at a certain industry and say, we're going to eliminate your industry. You need to shut down, you're unemployed, sell your assets. I'm not going to do that, and I won't have to make that call because I'm finished here in a few weeks. You know, I think reasonable controls are warranted, and permitting and fees and some obvious temperature restrictions, things like that. But I'm not going to target a single industry and say you are bad, therefore you must be put out of business.
Ooh. You know what? This is what I wanted to ask. What is the future of the carriage companies in your mind?
I don't know. I think it's going to be this ongoing tug of war with those who really are opposed to carriage tours. I don't know.
Is it an anti-tourism campaign or is it an anti-animal campaign in your mind?
Probably some of both.
Okay.
You know, with tourism, we want to maintain a livable city and we don't want to become a Disney World. We also want to understand that tourism is what keeps our property taxes manageable. And some will say, well, my property taxes are just outrageous. Well, take your home and go to the Northeast and see what you would pay in property taxes. I have family up in the Northeast, and I know what they pay in property taxes. And it is many times more than what my husband and I pay for our home.
Okay.
So it's a question of balance, and everybody has a different set of scales as to what is balance. And we do the very best we can. There are no perfect answers. I'm sorry, you know, I'm not going to be able to give you a perfect answer.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I want to see tourism be a big part of the city. I want to see it generate lots of revenue for the city because that gives us the ability to do things. But I also want to see it not take over and become really destructive.
Okay. This is a difficult question to ask, and I don't know if you were able to do it right now, maybe later on. If you were to sit down with Carroll Jacks right now, what would you tell her as far as surviving on city council?
Be quiet for 6 months. Learn. Don't be in such a hurry to show everybody how much you know.
And I know if you were to sit down with Mayor Tecklenburg, what would be your message to him as far as governing this city going forward for the next 2 years?
Listen to your city council. There's some good minds on that council and some good trains of thought. And my credo, and this is where Mayor Riley was so smart.
Okay.
When you are a new mayor or when even an older mayor with some experience, surround yourself with brilliant people who are better at their jobs than you are. They will bring you up.
Is he surrounding himself with good people at City Hall?
Well, that's in the eye of the beholder.
Okay. Kathleen Wilson, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Oh, thank you. It's always good to be here.
Likewise.